Hello and welcome back to Amiable Arguments. I'm here in a jumper and a cup of tea because it's quite cold, so all the good ingredients for recording a podcast today. And I'm excited today to be talking with a friend of mine, Migjen. Migjen, hi, how are you doing?
Hi, great to be here, honestly. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on. So, Migjen, what is it that you want to talk to folks about today?
Well, I mainly just wanted to sort of give my perspective on the whole being an immigrant and integrating um thing.
Okay.
Ma- Mainly just because I don't think I've seen it anywhere, so I figure I'd be somebody to say that,
Okay.
just give my perspective on it.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So I suppose the first question that I obviously have to ask is, what makes you think you've got the right to come over here and nick our jobs?
God, see, that is a funny question. Oh God, that is a question I get into so many arguments about. Because here's the thing.
Don't you think you should stop that?
You're right. I probably should. But
Okay.
here's the thing. A little bit of background for me. I came here when I was 3, so I didn't really have much of a choice in that. And I've stayed around here so long that I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I'm British at this point. Like every time I go back home, it's like this is nice, this is lovely, this isn't me.
No one can see this but me, but currently on Migjen's camera, he's got a lovely English-looking frigate boat on his windowsill, which is how I know that he's got his British credentials right there.
Oh God, it's honestly just happened slowly over the years. I didn't notice it at first, but then I looked around and I thought, wow, yeah, Eastern European, I am not.
So where are you from originally, Migjen?
Oh, I am from Kosovo. We came over here after the Civil War. I remember there being a war my parents told me about, and that's why they came over here.
Well, I assume this was to do with the breaking up of Yugoslavia.
Yeah, that was it.
In
That was it.
the Balkans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun time. Almost got sold to some Germans along the way.
You did.
Good time. Yeah. Some German couple, like it was right at my parents were at the border to the UK, and some Germans were like approaching them. It was like, "Excuse me, can we buy your baby? He looks very lovely."
Aww.
And when I heard that,
How
story, I
much
just
has
thought,
changed?
wow, not much has changed. No, they're still stealing babies from Eastern Europe. God damn.
Right.
This is why I'm glad Britain is a thing. It keeps Germany in check.
We are doing our part, I have to say. Have been for many years. But okay, joking aside, so
Yeah.
the first serious question that I actually want to ask you is, what was it about Britain that made your parents want to move here, of all places in the world?
They saw Britain and they saw that they could have a better life here than back home in Kosovo, and well, they were right. Again, a lot more money, a lot more like opportunities and all that. The usual reasons people come here.
Yes.
And me growing up, I believe I went to a very traditionalist primary school. Like I remember this vividly. Like there was this one teacher who was your stock and standard like scary British old lady who had a little ruler for everybody.
Oh, we've all had one.
Yeah, that one. And I just remember her, and I think she had like a lot to do with how I grew up seeing things.
Okay.
Like there was, I guess she was like my first introduction into the way British people do things. Granted, not the best introduction, but
No.
it works. Like, okay, you follow the rules, you do what the person tells you, otherwise you get a whacking.
Yes.
And,
yeah, I think
gotten a few.
schooling's changed a little bit since then. Apparently, it's frowned upon now to rule the children, but apparently, yeah. Dear me. But okay. So, and then I suppose. So, where have you where specifically in the UK did the move to? Have you always lived in one area of the UK all your life, or?
Yeah. My parents moved to London, where we lived in think, a hostel for the first few years, and then we moved to a council flat, also in London.
Also in London, right? So you've
Yeah,
you've
so
lived in
I've
London.
not really like expanded out of London, which is
Okay.
a shame because, and everything I've seen from outside London, it just looks so nice compared to everything inside.
Ooh, damning.
Like, don't get me wrong, there are nice places. I like going to Camden Market by the river. It's lovely. It's just that the area I'm in is just concrete.
Right, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to start on this podcast right now for Migjen, we're going to start a relief fund so that we can, justice for Migjen, so that we can get him to live in a place in Britain of his choice. And I'm definitely going to be able to have the power to do this with all 50 of my viewers. We're going to get Migjen to Bath. We're going to do it.
Oh god, my sister's living in Bath.
Oh really?
Oh dear god.
Of all the places.
That's gonna be the weirdest family reunion.
Yeah.
Like, so what are you doing here, Mitchell? It's like, well, I was on this podcast.
Yeah.
And this lovely chap like offered to pay my way here.
I did. I took extreme pity on you. Okay, so what has your experience been living as a, I suppose, first generation, because you all came at once, first generation immigrant to the UK?
It has been, as a whole, very split.
Okay.
Like, you have the two factors in your life that affect basically how you form your personality. Like, there's home, essentially. Like, for me, Kosovo, Eastern Europe, my parents just like trying to influence me, and then there is here, the place I live. Oh, hang on. The place that I basically being raised in. Like, I'm learning his values, learning his cultures, and it's sort of weird. Like, learning how to balance the two, because if you go full one way, full the other, you get problems. Like, if I went full British, I would have my parents feel really bad because their child was brought here and now they're not. Now it's not their child anymore. But if I go the other way, then, well, I'm basically a Kosovan living in another country.
Yes, in which case, why not be in Kosovo? I suppose is the argument.
Honestly, yeah, because I've seen every time we go back, my relatives in Kosovo, they're happy there. They granted, they still want, more money so they can live better and everything, but in terms of like being people in their own community, they've got it down.
Okay.
And I guess that's one problem you run into. It's like finding a sense of belonging somewhere. Because again, as I mentioned, like where do you draw the line? Where's the split views? Like, how much of one are you?
Yes. Okay, so sort of centering on that theme that you were just talking about of belonging. How so you've obviously just mentioned how you feel a bit of a split, and of course there's a necessity to acknowledge your heritage and where you came from, but also a desire to assimilate and be a part of Team Britain, as it were. How much do you feel that you've been supported in becoming a part of Team Britain, in being becoming a part of this country and its values and its all those sorts of things?
Well, now granted, I am fairly certain this is because I live in London.
Okay.
But not that much, I would say. Like, again, because London's a very multicultural place, you don't really have people asserting British culture that much. How the place I live in right now used to be full of Irish people. Then they moved out, and, well, now there's a different demographic here. But regardless of where I went, I didn't have, like, British culture imposed on me. It was more like I saw it, and there was something about it that I really liked.
Okay.
And so I gravitated towards it on my own accord.
Right, okay. So as opposed to a top-down perspective, of assimilation and almost an enforced assimilation. It was just sort of born out of a natural fondness for what we have here.
Yeah, it was like whenever I watch stuff like Top Gear, I don't know, like I liked the people there, the presenters, like something about them I just liked, and I wasn't seeing that in my day to day, so I just kind of I don't know, I idolized, I guess is a good word.
I suppose so. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
as much as one can idolize Richard Hammond and James May and Jeremy Clarkson and the Stig, of course.
Yeah, God, it's just so weird. It's so weird to describe it because they are the upper class guys with too much money on their hands, and I don't know, just something about that spoke to me. I was like, okay, let's like lean into this a bit more, and well, I guess that kind of got me into a bit of English culture,
Yes.
mainly the tea addiction. But
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sipping it right now. Don't worry, not straight into the microphone, but
yeah,
no, I'm having a lovely cup of tea. The okay, so what would you say is the difference between, I'm not sure how to phrase this, but between from what you've observed between British values and the British way of life versus I don't know, a Kosovo way of life? What would you know, what are the real differences that you notice when you're in the two places?
It's God, like Kosovo was a country that came out of the USSR, like fairly like screwed up. So like it's a lot more reserved than British culture. Like the few friends of mine I speak to that were born and raised here, they're a lot more friendly than everyone else is back home.
Right.
Like, especially when I was introducing my mother to them, she was very suspicious of them. Like didn't know what to make of them.
Right.
Meanwhile, like their family was very open, very accepting of me, and they just saw that as weird. And I was attributed to just like family drama, but no, apparently that's a fairly common thing. Like people from Eastern Europe being more reserved than the British.
Yeah, we're which is quite strange actually, because we're regarded as being quite sort of in the imperial sense, just a stiff upper lip, somewhat reserved, bit of witty sarcasm, but not a flamboyant people.
No, but you're not a suspicious people either. Like Kosovars are definitely suspicious of people they don't know.
Right.
Like, the first reaction when you tell your family you're going out with some friends is like, okay, who are these people? Where do they live? What are you doing? When are you coming back? It's just like question. It's like, okay, this is a bit different from the other people here. I think I'm reasonably sure.
Okay, and so in your experience, what would you say is do you think that trying to figure out how to properly formulate the question on a larger scale, on a less personal scale, but on a larger scale, what would you say? Would you encourage further immigration to the country? Would you say that on the whole it's been a very successful thing, having been someone that's come along in that in that sort of wave as the as it's picked up, or what's your views on it as more as a whole, as a concept?
The topic of immigration in general, you mean?
Well, specifically to this country, not.
Yeah. God.
There are no right or wrong answers. I'm curious as to.
I know. It's just another topic that always gets me into arguments because.
This podcast is called Amiable Arguments, so
that's a rarity in my life. Usually it's just yelling. But yeah, there's this thing. I don't know how else to describe it apart from like a tie, a bond, a rope, or something. A hook you get when, like, as an immigrant or even a first generation or second generation immigrant, where people expect you to be for immigration. They just, oh, you're an immigrant, so obviously you're for immigration.
Mm.
Me, I'm not. And I remember way back when in secondary school when I was seeing like a bunch of problems coming up of like a lot of people coming in through mass migration. And I remember just thinking, why don't you just close the borders? They just fix the problem, then open them back up again. Why just keep them open?
Okay.
But whenever I brought that up, I was just met with a lot of a lot of very hostile responses. I'd say, because well, it makes no sense. Why is the immigrant against immigration? Well, because I can see that there are problems coming from it that aren't getting addressed, so I can't really be for it in good conscience. Like the place I live right now being a good example. Like, there's a lot more homeless people here now, where there wasn't before. Like when I was a kid, like a decade ago,
Right.
and I don't know what's happening, but I don't think that having more people here would fix it.
Because you think that the problem already is overcrowding and overpopulation.
Yeah, because the streets are kind of like the high street is kind of packed whenever I go down it,
Mm.
and I think that's normal. I think, but whenever I go to visit friends from outside of London, like it's not that bad. Like you don't have trash on the streets, you don't have homeless people,
Mm.
well, as much. So I just think that there's something wrong here. I just can't point to what.
Okay. Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, my position has always been that immigration is neither wholly good or wholly bad. It can be very useful at times, and I think since even before I was political, a sentiment that I've always personally held that I've never really been able to shake has been the simple fact that I think it's probably the highest honour that a country can receive if a person from another country looks at all 195 countries in the world and decides that yours out of all of those is the one that they think is the one that would guarantee them a better quality of life and more opportunities, to have a fuller and richer upbringing. I've always thought that, and I still do. I still hold it as a deep compliment. But I do also fundamentally feel that it's pointless going to another country only to live in the same way that you once did in the one where you've came from. And it's very strange because as long as I've grown up, I mean, I was born in 1996, up north in a non-specific area, and for as long as I have been alive, I have lived within multiculturalism. I've always, I was born, just sort of as things were really starting to ramp up. I was born 1 year before Tony Blair, so when the mass migration all started to happen. So in that sense, things are only simply as I have always known them to be. And that's so I suppose what I'm getting to is the things that you're speaking to problems of this and that and some problems that it's creating. It gets harder to solve those when in the living memory of certainly young people now, you're basically arguing against the status quo that they've known genuinely all their entire life. Things have been this way. So any deviation from that, such as putting immigration down or closing the borders, is seen as radical.
Yeah, I see your point there, and that definitely would explain why a lot of young people don't really have a problem with it. But, God, Yeah, it's one of those.
He's
things
giving me
where
that
how
face
do
that
you-
says, "But they're wrong." That's what it is.
They really are. They honest to God are. They see back when I was working as like agency staff, I ran into this one coworker of mine
Mm.
who he has like an instinctual distrust of the English flag. You know, the white and red one.
Yes.
Yeah, anyone who has
George's
it,
one.
like he gets a little nervous around that. I was sitting there thinking, why?
Mm.
Like what? Because he associates that with racists and racism, and I'm just wondering how many young people, like my age and below, still think that way about their own country. Essentially, like, oh, only racists have this flag. It's like, yeah. I mean, I got a big wall. I could probably fit a flag on here.
Sure. I suppose really that it's I could only guess, of course, but I think it's the fact that a flag, one of the things it obviously represents is an exclusivity. That a flag, by its nature, is a symbol of a particular thing, whatever that be, whether it be a British flag to represent Britain, whether it be a pride flag to represent, sort of those social justice rights, or whether it be a flag to represent, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag from the American Revolution, and they're all there to give off certain messages and to relay certain pieces of information purely through the medium of picture or art or whatever you'd like to call it. And I suppose one of those things that it relays is the fact that, well, if the English flag represents England, then that means that it can't be representative of things outside of England.
Yeah, that makes sense. The English flag does not represent the French, nor should it ever.
I feel like he's
That's
stolen,
another thing
he's
I've
stolen one of
adopted.
my lines.
I just hate the French now. It started as a joke,
Right.
but the more I look into it, the more I hate it.
Migjen, I'll have no hate crimes on this podcast, okay? No hate speech,
Right,
no
right.
violation of hate speech
But-
laws.
But I do get what you mean. Like, if a flag of a country represents that country, then it, by its definition, excludes every other country out there. Because otherwise, well, what's the difference between like France and Germany? Otherwise, if they just get rid of the flags and the borders
Well,
and
I
everything.
suppose the difference between France and Germany is Belgium.
That is a good point. Completely forgot about Belgium. I guess just after,
I'm only
after
teasing,
Brexit, I
folks.
just realized I don't need to worry about this place anymore. They can go crazy all they like.
Belgium no longer lives rent-free in your head.
Feels great. Feels great, man.
Feels great. Oh dear. Okay, so what? Okay, so you've outlined some. You've spoken sort of vaguely about the premises of problems with migration, but could you sort of lay out to me why you think that there are problems? And I suppose more to my question is, what would you say to a young person who has lived in this environment all their life to persuade them that it shouldn't be this way?
That is a good question.
It's okay. I'll edit out the thinking time.
Yeah. God, that is difficult to say because young people these days are right now very concerned with their online presence, so they don't really care about what's happening around them in real life. So I don't know if there really is a way to do it apart from like trying to instill some sense of pride in the country and what it was, and then just saying it's like, okay, we like this country, we like the traditions and all this, we like our lovely ships on our windowsills. We would like to keep that, but there's so many people coming in and their traditions differ from ours that we're kind of getting pushed out, so maybe we can slow that down a little bit. Yeah, that's a terrible argument for young people, I realize.
Well,
But
wouldn't I suppose someone might say in retort, which is simply me obviously playing devil's advocate to
Yeah.
get the brain juices flowing, but that this is as the world becomes ever more globalized, and let's face it, very much a great deal of this is brought on by capitalism and the breaking down of borders and the rise of the corporation, and as trade becomes more and more integrated, and we start. I mean, even obviously the classical liberal economist, Austrian Hayek, Frederick Hayek, who wrote The Road to Serfdom. I was reading that, and he argued that essentially the way to, obviously he argued individual freedom and the rights of the individual and all those sorts of things are best guaranteed within a federal, world. That the world should be ever increasing towards federalism and freedom of movement and all these sorts of things that so I think Hayek would have been very much in favour of the European Union, but so what, is there what I suppose what I'm asking is there inevitability to all of this?
See,
not to make you feel all doomy and gloomy, but
no, I get it. Yeah. As for inevitability, I do understand where you're coming from. I remember back in uni when I was doing a paper on Walt Disney. It's just, well, the main problems I saw in there was the excesses of capitalism, like the stereotypical evil boss that is turning his workers into slaves or whatever. Like, yeah, unchecked capitalism, which goes crazy. I'm pretty sure, it would make sense for a purely capitalist society to just abolish countries because, well, where's the profit incentive to keeping them? And if your whole worldview revolves around, profit incentives, then you're gonna get rid of things like nations pretty quickly, which is not good, honestly. But I don't think that's sustainable in the long term because I don't think a lot of people are very 100% profit motivated, and
no,
there's
nor do I.
other things to it.
And I think that's a mistake that the socialists often make. They forget about the human factor of motives, and that all these CEOs are not entirely driven by profit at all times. They have feelings about things. They have compulsions and, dare I even say, ethics in a charitable way. Even if I disagree with them, they have things they want.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I may disagree with the head of Amazon on a great many things, but I can't say that he is a man solely driven by money.
No.
But I don't think that would last very long. It sounds like a very unstable thing, just because your average everyday Joe doesn't want to get rid of his country. Like, he likes his country. It's something that gives him a sense of identity. And if you get rid of that, well, you better replace it with whatever corporate structure you have. Otherwise, he's going to be very angry. Like, if you don't make like the country, the nation, the mythos of Amazon, then Amazon is going to get torn apart by its own workers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you we just sort of brushed over a little bit earlier the European Union, and you were sort of celebrating the idea of never having to think about Belgium again, but I'm going to make you think about it a little bit, so I do apologise, because I just wanted to drag us back into the Brexit debate, unfortunately, just because as someone who has come from forgive my ignorance, is Kosovo in the European Union?
Yeah.
It is.
It is, yes.
Yes. So as someone who has come from another place in the European Union, and Britain obviously leaving it eventually, the narrative around Brexit was, of course, that it was anti-foreigner, anti-immigration, but obviously as an immigrant yourself, you seem to be of been in favour of it. So, which isn't a perspective that you certainly heard a great deal on the media. So I was just wondering if you could explain that sort of process to me and how you got to that trail of thought.
Well, it's relatively simple. It was, again, it was one of those questions that you'll find in your life a lot as like a first and second generation immigrant. Where am I from, and where do I side with?
Mm.
Like, am I a Kosovan British person, or am I a British Kosovan?
Mm.
And for me, like living in Britain so long, like admiring its culture, I just decided that okay, Brexit is the decision I will make here. Is that either I am for Kosovo first or for Britain first, and I chose Britain, and it's much to the chagrin of my parents.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, it really does sound corny, like right out of a movie where you have to make a choice and there's no going back. But it really was that.
Yeah.
That you got to decide where you are from at that point. What culture are you adopting? Who is it that you want to be? And I wanted to be British.
Okay. Right. That's because I suppose that's another thing, isn't it? That I see this a lot now that I'm living in London. That you meet a lot of people from all over the world, of course, and London feels very much like don't know how to. It just feels like a massive trading port from people from all over the world. You know, that sort of
Yeah.
you know, as opposed to being a distinctly British place. It's beginning. It feels like just a massive melting pot that will eventually, you know, from all over the world. And so what I'm saying is that it feels like a place that is inhabited by people who don't particularly feel a strong pull to being British, as you described that you want to be. They in fact, they could live anywhere really, as long as they think it gives them the best opportunities. You know,
Yeah.
they're people who could live anywhere, whereas you seem to be more of a person of somewhere, and that somewhere specific is Britain. Um,
Yeah, I definitely do agree with you on the place not feeling like a city. Because again, whenever I visit anywhere outside of London, I can like there's a distinct feeling of a culture there. Like people say thank you to the bus driver, and it's so inconsequential. But in London, you don't talk to anybody at all. Not the bus driver, not the lorry driver, nobody. So it is always a weird thing for me to get used to every time I visit my mates, and it just does highlight how I don't know sterilized London feels at times. So I think that was the feeling I was becoming aware of as I grew up. Like, there was a culture here. I can see it in like the architecture of some buildings, but it's not here now. I feel like I missed it.
You feel like London is a city completely devoid of culture.
It feels like it's getting that way. Just something about it is missing from 10 years ago, and I know it was there. I remember it being there 10 years ago when I walked down the high street, but now it's straight up gone. Like I remember, yeah, a couple of weeks back, I was hanging out with a friend and we went to Camden Market. And on our way to Camden Market, we went through some streets that were just I don't know how to describe it, but barren, like concrete, and then there was like metal buildings for shops, like a Sainsbury's or whatever. And all of that was just outside of Camden Market. Once we got into Camden Market, we saw, well, all of Camden Market, like all of that, just a huge, like concentration of like cultures and like British punk stuff as well.
Oh yes.
And we walked like down the river to the train station at the end of the day, and as I was reflecting on it, I realized that's kind of like London. Like there are these areas that have a lot of culture in them, like Big Ben, Trafalgar Square, like said the I forgot, British History Museum, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, like these places that are beautiful. They're very well maintained, but once you go away from them just a little bit, you sort of see, I don't know, like an underbelly of the city,
Mm.
and then not like in like the cool James Bond crime family way. It's like no, it's just like dirt and homeless people everywhere, and I'm sitting there wondering why is there such a split here? Like, it just feels like night and day, even though it's a couple like blocks.
What one might argue that the city has never had more culture in its existence. One might argue that simply by walking down the road that I live on, one can go past a Jamaican restaurant and a Lebanese restaurant, and they can see people busking on the streets, singing songs from South American villages. That there's an enormous amount of life and culture around, but it's simply not uh, it's not a monoculture anymore as it used to be. And some might say that having this melting pot of all these different cultures together is in fact an improvement. Do you feel that way, or do you feel differently?
I mean, I get where the argument is coming from, but it all feels very surface level to me.
Hmm.
Like, yes, you have this Jamaican guy, this Jamaican guy playing Jamaican songs. Yes, you have this Chinese restaurant serving lovely Chinese food, but do you really get to see into Jamaican culture like through that, or Chinese culture through the Chinese restaurant? Like the melting pot, it just it seems like the little lumps in it aren't melting together. Like there's a lot of them, granted. So when you like look at it from afar, it looks like it's all coming together. But
Hmm.
when you're living in it, right, for a long time, especially, you sort of notice that everyone's got their own little section, and I don't know. It kind of seems like they're isolated from each other.
Which is exactly how it is up north, actually, where I come from. It's very much that far away from the dream of integration. It's very much that all of the different identities keep to themselves in their own little areas, and it seems to be breeding, worryingly, a great deal of distrust and alienation amongst a lot of people. But I found it very strange because I went to Devon. I've just got back. You can tell from my lack of tan that and whilst I was there, Devon's definitely one of the most still ethnically English, places that you'll ever go. It's an enormous throwaway from London. I imagine that it shares similar demographics to those of 1880. Let's put it that way. But what I just found very strange about it is that apart from the fact that it's obviously a more of a countryside area, and it has Plymouth, of course, which but even Plymouth very much felt like it was of the same sort of stock, and I got the feeling that I saw some people there, and I spoke to some people, and they said, well, we really want to diversify the place. We want to mix it up a little bit. They were saying about how stale it all felt like. It was a place too set in its ways, and like how we needed to change that and to make it more like London. And I found that very strange because I didn't get the opportunity to ask how many of them had been to London. I imagine they must have done, obviously, to want it to be like it. But for the people living in the villages, where the life is slower and things aren't open to a great deal of change, and they enjoy the tradition of it all, it's very easy to see why these are such conservative places. because they enjoy things the way they are, and I suppose it gets into the ethics of the question as to was it right to without the consent of the British people put these enormous changes upon them. I think it's one of the questions that we all know wants to be asked, but no one really, certainly no one in Parliament. You'll never hear anyone in Parliament discussing it. But do you have any thoughts?
God, I would definitely say that it is really not something that should have been done. Like, without asking the people, like, do you want more people of different cultures coming in here, yada yada. If it's just thrust upon people, then there's gonna be distrust, because again, if somebody's not integrating well, they're making themselves a social outcast at that point, and well, that does breed resentment.
Yes.
And from what I can tell, yeah, it really should not happen, like, at all.
Okay.
As he said, it's not fair on the people who are living there, because they were born there, they were raised there, that's their home. They don't really have anywhere else to go. It'd be like, it would be like what happened to me when I was a baby. It's just like, okay, your country is now in complete war. You should probably leave. Where to?
Okay.
And that was not a good thing that happened to me back then, so I wouldn't recommend it to happen to anyone else.
Yes, and I'm obviously I'm really sorry that did have to happen, and that people obviously from your country had to live in them circumstances. It's from what I understand, it was a really, really horrible sort of thing to end the century with. It was a pretty dark a bunch of events.
Welcome to Eastern Europe. Oh God, but that's fine. Life has its ups and its downs.
Yes.
Dear God.
So yeah, okay. So what, in your opinion, to sort of because we've talked quite a bit now about problems and things that we see to be wrong, but can you bring any positives out of the immigration that this country has brought from your point of view? I have my own, of course, but do you have anything that you feel has really enriched us and made things better, and that has helped us as people to see things in a more enlightened way?
Well, I would say that in the beginning, before things went crazy, you definitely did have a lot of people learning to empathize with others of different cultures, like to understand, like, oh, okay, there could be a rapport with these people, even though they have like their own culture. They back when I came in, like, they were still trying to integrate well.
Sorry, what sort of year was that?
I think 99, I think.
Okay.
So again, I was 3, so my memory is a bit off.
Sure.
But yeah, the immigrant that comes in here to integrate, to become like the native culture, granted, they'll still have their own culture that they'll bring with them, but as long as that doesn't supersede the native culture, that you would end up having, I would say, a nice benefit from that. Because with Eastern Europeans, we will work ourselves to death. Honest to God.
That's a stereotype, isn't it?
It is. It's one I'm living up to every day of my life, as it turns out.
Still can't afford that house in Bath, though, can you?
Oh God, but yeah, like, I'm an example of that, where you get somebody who has a certain work ethic and who integrates well, and then you have somebody with a good work ethic who came to this country and is now helping it out. I would say that's one of the benefits of immigration. Assuming they integrate properly, you'll have a bigger skill set, more people to work with.
Yeah.
Best case scenario.
I remember at the time of the it's become quite infamous now, but I remember at the time when the whole Brexit debate was going on, there was this particular lady on Question Time, and I just watched a gog as she sort of said, yes, but if we vote for Brexit, then all the immigrants will go back to their own countries. And then she said, and then who will make our coffees for us in Pret? But you obviously, I'm glad to see you still stuck around to make coffees for us all, Migjen, in Pret.
Honestly, that pissed me off so much because I was at the time where I was graduating from uni, I needed a job, and then I hear this lady say that, and I was like, yeah, I'll take that job. It's like, what's it pay? Like what, $8.50 an hour? Gimme, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Literally, I was the actual meme. Like, yes, I'll do the job. Thanks.
Yes. But what I really hated about that was a racism that few people seem to cotton on to, which was that there are some jobs that are beneath the British people that we should leave to those filthy foreigners to do. It was just such a, like those inferior ones that can do the low-end jobs. I thought there was just something really disgusting about it. Like,
it really is. Like,
I was just a bit flabbergasted.
You only get that from like the upper class, and that's one thing I just love about Britain. Like, there's a clear line between the classes of people.
But you like the class system,
like that?
Yes.
I am not an upper class man. I am not in the slightest.
You have a much better beard than me, though, so I'll give you that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I was getting off topic. This lady, she does have a very low opinion of foreigners. Then, if she thinks that's all we do, because there are a lot of Eastern Europeans that did come to this country to go into high skilled jobs and help things out. But she just can't see that for some reason, and I wonder why. I just wonder why.
So
such a funny thing.
So to bring it away from more of an abstract and more into the specifics right now, the government have obviously, I don't know whether they've passed it or whether they're trying to pass it, but obviously this new immigration bill, which would basically make it so that only people with proof that they will, that have a job set and will be making more than, I think it's £25,000 a year, will be eligible to enlist for immigration. Do you agree with that policy?
Honestly, I can see the benefits of it. I really can, because the last thing you want is, and this is a thing, like I am brutally honest about the people you might get from Eastern Europe. Say some of them are really great, some of them are not. You really don't want the latter, you want the former.
Well, sure,
and I think
any country though has people like that.
Yeah, but they shouldn't be imposed on another country. It would be like sending all of our disabled and homeless over to France and expect them to take care of them. Now, granted, my opinion on the French, but I wouldn't wish that on them. There's a line, I feel, that has been crossed at that point. It is not something I would feel comfortable with, but this bill that would limit it so that only people who are on 25K and up, I think that would filter out a lot of, what's that? Not gold diggers. Chancers? No. Economic migrants. And people who just come there for the money.
Yeah. I suppose that's the thing as well, isn't it? That I find it very ironic. And I've genuinely tried, as I always do. I always, particularly with this podcast, I always try to look for the good intentions, and I try to look at things charitably from all perspectives. But I can't very much find the comprehension between, there's the Labour Party position on all of this, which is that we have to keep mass immigration going, whilst also claiming to be looking out for the working classes, because obviously nothing mass immigration does very much hurt the working classes, because if you flood any sort of area with a large number of people all vying for the same job, at the low end of the economic spectrum, then that creates obviously it changes the dynamics of the market, so that all of a sudden those on the top can charge smaller wages for those because they have so much option. Whereas if you have something like we have now with the lorries, and the HVC lorries and all that sort of thing, because so many people have left the UK and we don't have enough people to fill those to man the lorries. What they've done is they've raised the wages of the lorry drivers in order to incentivize and make it a more desirable job to do, which is surely what we want to be doing. We want to be creating high wages for people. Is that not? That surely making higher wages is what lifts people out of poverty and gives greater class mobility.
Oh yeah, that absolutely does. It's God, it is honestly such a problem. I've seen just how do I put this? The mass immigration to Britain. As you said, a lot more workers vying for the same jobs. That means their pay is going to be lower because it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market. But it's kind of like running a country on cocaine. You can do it for a little while. You can ignore the drowsiness, the sleepiness, but eventually you're going to run out and the withdrawal is going to hit you.
Don't do drugs, folks.
Really, don't do it. It is a horrible idea. I disavow anyone who endorses that, myself included.
Which is quite ironic because I'm sure there are many people in Parliament that have done cocaine. So, as they all
explain a few things.
Yeah, they brag every now and then.
They do.
They do. Damn. Oh yeah. You didn't miss that. It was very, very funny. They were all saying about how many drugs they'd done when they were back at uni, trying to be cool and popular. And I'm just there like, I'm not voting for you.
That is so goddamn cringe.
Cringe is exactly the word. It was cringe. It was total cringe. So yeah, okay. So sort of to round all of this off, is there any parting thoughts that you'd maybe like to give the listeners that you think they might not hear very often, or anything that you on a personal level feel that you have, you really want to get out there and spread the word?
I would say if you got somebody who's coming to this country to live in there and they're trying to make the effort and everything, they're going to run into a problem with like actual racists. Honestly, it is such a hassle. Such a hassle to deal with. So if you could show them that Britain isn't full of these guys, they'll turn out a lot better. Because I've seen people who came to live in this country, got bullied a lot because they were different, and then grew to resent it purely because of that. And if I was to say anything, it would just be like, okay, maybe help those guys not turn out like that.
Would you say that racism is still quite a prevalent problem in British society?
Funnily enough, you only really see it in extremes in places with a lot of immigration. Because you get the us versus them mentality.
Right.
And, well, that breeds resentment, which then, turns into racism, and then that just is a bad outcome for everyone involved. But, yeah, it's if somebody's trying to integrate, I don't know, give them a pat on the back or something. So something. I don't know. I honest to God don't know what to say. I don't know. Invite them for tea. It's
yes.
just something like that.
I'll
well
do
done,
that.
man.
Yes.
Congratulations.
A certificate or a gold star or something.
Get them a toy ship.
A toy ship.
That'll help.
Hey, I'm just saying, I don't have a toy ship, and I'm extremely jealous. I will have to get one. But I would only buy one, obviously, after I've saved up enough for your house in Bath.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
all
you
right.
very much.
You're my priority right now. Totally. Right. Well, okay. I guess we'll end it there then, because we're coming up to about the hour mark, and I've sort of tried to get into the knack of not wanting to go much further than that. So That's absolutely fantastic. Migjen, thank you for joining me today. Very, very much.
Thank you very much for having me. This was my first ever podcast. I'm glad it went so well.
Like and subscribe for more Migjen, folks. And whilst I'm not, being cliche as heck, I will obviously just give a enormous thank you to Irina once again for providing the artwork that will go over the top of this podcast. And also you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and I will link those in the description below. So until then, I'm going to make myself another pot of tea, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for listening, folks.